Okay, so thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Aaron. I have been a web developer for nearly 30 years now. And most of that time, I've also been really passionate about web performance. And when you talk about web performance, a really frequent topic tends to be JavaScript, especially how much JavaScript we make users download and the effect that has on their browsing experience. So today I want to talk about the idea of using less JavaScript, not just cutting it off like completely dumping it to the side or something, but just reducing the JavaScript patterns that we've been using for years in favor of more no or low JavaScript alternatives. As the slide says, I have nothing against JavaScript. It just has better things to do than to manage your accordions and navigate. So for years, if we wanted to do something with HTML and CSS, but natively couldn't do it, we grabbed JavaScript as a sort of a crutch and usually figured out some way to make things happen. For the most part, that's been really good for the web. It certainly helped user experiences. It's got a lot more interactive and exciting websites. And it's even helped HTML and CSS because they've been positively influenced by all the JavaScript alternatives that we've built. But it turns out that using JavaScript for everything can cause some problems. According to the HTTP archive, over the past 10 years, the median JavaScript download per page has roughly tripled. In 10 years, it's tripled. And remember that once JavaScript downloads, then it has to decompress, it has to execute in the browser, and then even once it's all set up and ready, it still consumes system resources while it's monitoring page activities and user interactions and reacting to those. And so all of this JavaScript just ends up creating slow page loads and janky user interactions. But there is hope. In the last 5 years alone, according to the project baseline, there have been 114 HTML and CSS features that have become either newly available or widely available. And we'll do a little bit more on project baseline in a second, but for now, just know that newly available means that a feature is supported by all the core browsers, and that's also known as being interoperable. And widely available means that a feature has been interoperable for at least 30 months, so 2.5 years. And in the day and age of evergreen browsers, hopefully that's enough to cover your browser matrix. But of course, you just want to check your analytics and make sure. So with all this HTML and CSS improvements, it would be nice if we could start letting the HTML and CSS do the things they can do so that JavaScript can really just focus on what we still need it to do. And that, of course, is the challenge. Like, how do you keep up with all these new features? What can you use? Where can you use it? When is it safe to use it? And most are probably already familiar with the browser compatibility tables that you can find in Can I Use and MDN.com. And I want to make sure everybody also knows about Project Baseline, which can be found at webstatus.dev. Baseline groups features, and it uses sort of worldwide browser statistics to try and bundle those into a browser matrix in a way. So depending on what your analytics says, you might find that you need features that are baseline as of 2024, maybe 2023, hopefully not older than that. And then you're able to go in and click on these and find out what features are supported and make sure that what you're trying to do fits. So today I'm going to run through a few examples. These are all pretty basic of what are typically JavaScript patterns that can now be handled completely by HTML and CSS. So first up is the accordion. I think everybody knows this pattern. There's an element, you click it, it makes some other content below it appear. You click it again, it hides. And this would have always been a JavaScript event listener on the first element, and it changes either some CSS or DOM to make the others show up, etc. And that's an event listener, and that's monitoring and reacting to user interactions, etc. So this can all now be handled straight by HTML. And I'm going to jump into CodePen real quick for this. And this is the details element. And right inside of it, we have a summary element. And what's inside of the summary is what you see visible on the screen. And when you click the summary, it automatically makes whatever else is inside the details panel show up. So below the summary, you can have anything. It can be bare text, it can be a paragraph, it can be a list, it can be a table, image, audio, video, even an iframe if you want to. Basically anything inside of the detail below the summary is going to, by default, initially be hidden. And when you click that summary, This is not even any CSS or JavaScript or anything. This is just straight up HTML. It shows up and it hides. And you get the lovely little caret there. That's a default pseudo element that shows up. So that's the default state. If you wanted your detail panel to also to initially be open, all you have to do is add the open attribute to that, and it shows up open, and after that, it works exactly the same. Fairly new is you can now also add a name attribute, and if you have multiple detail panels with the same name and the same value, they work kind of like radio buttons. They create an exclusivity, so only one with the same name can be open at a time. So here I've got the first open. If I click the second, it will open and the first automatically closes. The third automatically opens and closes the second. And again, this is all just straight HTML. I'm not doing anything special. These are kind of abrupt when they open. It's could be kind of startling. This is only a couple sentences, so it's not bad. But if you have like a big section, it could be jarring to the user. So you can also do animation. The animation does have a little caveat. There's a couple of items here that make this possible that are newly available, and there's one that is limited availability. The good thing is if they don't work, you get the same old behavior. It just pops open. If it does work, you get a nice slick animation. And on this example, you might notice that the marker is still just kind of jumping into place. So if I scroll down a little bit more, I've actually added an animation to the marker as well. So small caveat on the marker as well. You can do this, but there's a slight little bit of hackery involved as I scroll down here. So the marker is created by a pseudo element called marker. That just comes with the minute you create a details element, you automatically have this pseudo element called marker. The marker is still baseline limited availability, and that's basically WebKit. It doesn't support that yet. So for non-WebKit browsers, you can add a content none, which will kill the default. And for WebKit, you add on the summary a list style none, that kills it there. So now it's gone from everywhere, and then you can just create your own. I'm using the exact same thing. You can use anything you want there. Some positioning and styling and an animation. Ideally, N prefers reduced motion, and that just gives you a little animation thing. So again, all HTML, all CSS, no JavaScript. Make sure I got everything on this one. Marker, yes. Okay, so next up, I want to go into modals or popovers or overlays, whatever you prefer to call them. This one is, again, another familiar pattern. You click a thing, and it makes another content show up somewhere on the screen. This, again, is pure HTML. In this case, I have a button, and right below the button, I have a dialog again, and all you have to do is add a popover attribute to that. And that comes with a bunch of built-in functionality, thanks to HTML. And the button, I'm giving a popover target with a value that matches the ID of my popover element. And so when I click this, it just makes this box show up. If I click it again, it disappears. The popover has three values you can use. You notice here I'm using nothing. That's the default, which is auto. I can also do empty quotation marks. I can also explicitly say auto. All of those would be the same. What you get is an element that shows up. And if I click the same button again, the same initiator, it disappears. If I click outside of it, it disappears. If I hit the escape key, it disappears. If I open another auto, it makes all the other autos disappear. So these, again, are exclusive. If you don't want it to automatically disappear, you can also give it a value of manual. And a manual will also make autos disappear, but other manuals do not make a manual disappear. So a little deep in the woods here, but these are not dismissible, light dismissible rather. The escape key doesn't do it, clicking outside doesn't. Clicking the same button will make it close, or you can add a lovely little close button and it will make it close. And those look kind of isolated, just sitting there on their own. So you can also add the pseudo element of a backdrop. This automatically shows up with my popover. It is a pseudo element that's just provided by the browser by default. It is an HTML pseudo element, so you can style that with CSS. Here I've got a background color with semi-opacity. You can have a background image. You can have a gradient in there, whatever you want to do. This particular one is light dismissible, so I can just kill that. But you notice that, again, kind of jumps in, and it's kind of startling when it first appears. So again, it's HTML and CSS. You can have it animate in. you'll notice the backdrop sort of fades in. The popover itself gets a little shift down. So that is all, again, just HTML, CSS. Is that everything for those? There is a third type of popover. It's hint, but it is not consistently supported or implemented. So it's one I would avoid for now. For everything I do, I've found that the auto in the manual covers it. Also, the default for any kind of a popover, it gets position fixed, center. It gets an inset of 0, so the top right, bottom left are all 0, and it has a margin of, so that's what gives it an automated center appearance. It also initially has default none and opacity 0. And so those are all just CSS, though, a native browser, so you can override those anytime. And I think that covered that one. Next up is actually an extension of popover, but instead of it just being in the middle of the screen, there's a couple of different ways you can position it. We'll get into it with this custom CSS for this. So another really common pattern you'll see with JavaScript is the off-screen navigation menu. So here, this is a popover. Put it on my nav. Again, the button has a popover target that matches the ID, and that just makes this pop in. I've removed some of the default CSS that comes with. Move the margin, I've done a width, I've given it some custom placement. Just to make it slide in from the right, I've added the backdrop, it's got a drop shadow, and this one is popover type of auto. So I can either click outside of it, or if you click one of the menu items, it automatically closes it. Oops, didn't mean for it to do that. So another option you can use that for is related content. If you have subject you're talking about in an article, for example, and you want to provide some background information sort of an aside, you would do that the exact same way. In fact, I'm using an aside popover button and aside here. And this one I made manual, so when it opens, I can't implicitly close it, but if I click the thing, it closes again. Or I can click the button for that. So these are nice for if you want to do your email newsletter sign up, if you want to do something like a shopping cart. All of this stuff could be activated, made, shared, visible with this popover feature. And I think that's everything here. I already talked about all of that. Yeah. And so the last example I want to do is, I couldn't come up with an elegant name for this one, so it is the input with auto filter suggestions dropdown. And this one is not really much more than an input element. It's got the value, a type of text, but you'll notice it has a list attribute, and the value of that is browsers. That matches the ID of the data list, and that's where the magic happens, is this connection and the data list. And what that allows you to do is create a curated list of options for this input type. And when I click into it, it automatically appears. I also get the caret that makes it appear. And what's magic about these is I can start typing, and it will auto filter down to those that still match. I can arrow down to that and grab it. I can scroll down to it and click. But what separates this from a standard select that would have a drop down is, even though I have these options, I can also type in anything I want. So it works sort of like, I think we used to call them combo box way back. And so it works kind of like that. And this is cross-browser. Everybody's accepting this right now. You can also add the data list to non-textual input fields. So textual would be like text would be email, URL, that type of thing. But Firefox currently still doesn't support it on non-textual. So even though I can do this with my number, Firefox doesn't support the data list for that yet. I can use it here for number. Again, Firefox doesn't support that. There's also a small, well, not small, it's actually a pretty big accessibility issue with data lists. So that's something to be concerned about. The scaling, if you try and plus or minus the viewport, what's inside the dropdown does not scale with the rest of the page text. And screen readers can't read what's inside. So this isn't a great one yet, but it's one to know is coming. And those are the main features I want to talk about, but they're really, as I said at the beginning, these are such simple examples. I just wanted something easy to run through here. But it's really just the beginning of this because there's so much more you can do right now with HTML and CSS. Lazy loading is one of the great features. You replace JavaScript lazy loading with just an HTML attribute, and that removes a ton of JavaScript that intersection observer listeners, and you don't have to worry about somebody scrolling too fast and seeing broken image elements because the data source didn't get changed in source yet. You don't worry about the MP involved with that. Some lazy loads, depending on the implementation. JavaScript implementations can also damage your LCP. They can open up CLS. So all of those are gone with native lazy loading. You can also do JavaScript carousels and sliders. A lot of the variations you want to do can be done straight with HTML CSS, from simply just swiping stuff to scroll snap. You can have left and right navigation arrows. You can have the dot navigation across the bottom. Some of those you need to add a little bit of JavaScript. This is where the low JavaScript comes in, where if you want to synchronize like a thumbnail strip with which slide is currently active in the main carousel, you need a little JavaScript for that. Same with the dot navigation. But again, that's so much less JavaScript than you would be using for full-blown JavaScript carousel. And I haven't even had time to get into things like anchor positioning and sticky headers and scroll animations and view transitions. And CSS has really done, HTML and CSS have really improved a lot in the last years. And so this is stuff we can do to reduce the JavaScript load so that it can focus on some more intensive tasks. And there's a ton of resources out there. I've just listed a few that helped me get this together, but that pretty much wraps it up. I will done a little bit early, but I will go ahead and open this up. If anyone has any questions on anything, you're welcome to reach out to me on any of these platforms. I'm obviously really eager to talk about this stuff. Kind of hard to get me to shut up. So if you got a question, let me know. Otherwise, I think that's it for me.